ADR, Alternative Dispute Resolution, or is it a disaster report in the making? Sorry, wanted to get your attention because a colleague and I have been warning about this for nearly 3 years. The ADR system's breaking, and we've continued to explain why and what to do about it. It isn't consumers' fault, and mostly it isn't providers' fault, and it ain't rocket science. So, what's going on? There's been plenty of research on the experience of users of ADR schemes. In April this year, BEIS produced a report, Resolving Consumer Disputes, ADR and the Court System, finding that in cases where the ADR provider decided in favour of the consumer, 83% of consumers perceived the process to be fair, dropping by 66% in cases where the decision was in favour of the trader or a compromise. Next piece of government research is the Sunhot. Stop asking questions we know the answers to and stop using taxpayers' money to do so, please. That report I mentioned, I undertook a Freedom of Information request and found out that it cost £68,070. Findings from such reports show varying degrees of ADR awareness amongst consumers, how satisfied they are, how long they wait, etc., etc. But solutions to these problems are not with consumers. We don't need to repeatedly ask about ADR. We know what they think. Action needs to be taken to get provision right so that consumers are served appropriately. I co-authored 2 reports with Marcus Williamson, editor of CEOemail.com. Ombudsman and Omnishambles in June 2016 and more Ombudsman Omnishambles in February of this year. They identified a number of areas of continued concern which the relevant bodies still refuse to address. I told you people weren't listening. I don't have nearly enough time to go into detail, of course, about all the issues, or indeed all 13 recommendations, but I'd like to provide a brief overview of 5 of the recommendations. A central portal which signposts consumers to the right ADR scheme, asking a variety of questions to direct them. Funded by ADR schemes in proportion to member numbers, it would signpost consumers correctly, online, through written correspondence and by phone to reduce confusion. We need to verify figures and statements to ensure that all ADR annual reports and reviews are appropriately and adequately monitored. They should be verified by a chartered statistician. Approval bodies should at least have access to case management systems to check that figures are correct, including follow-up with consumers and companies to ascertain accuracy. This should form part of the annual renewal approval process. It doesn't at the moment. Unbelievable. Really? Mandatory membership of an ADR scheme should clearly be the ultimate goal for successful operation of the ADR system in the UK. Until then, cherry-picking cases of non-members by providers should not be allowed. It obviously results in a number of issues, not least the variations in who gets what services, but also that traders are paying yearly, ultimately paying for other services. But it's happening. Bring the approval bodies such as CTSI and CAA to account. BEIS, as the government body ultimately responsible for this area, has consistently maintained a soft touch approach, leaving important issues unresolved. Aim for Ombudsman status. With membership of the Ombudsman Association, which has proven higher standards for membership than for approval by the CAA and CTSI. This is clearly evidenced by the minutes from an Ombudsman Association meeting last year regarding the revoking of approval of an ombudsman, which did not meet their requirements but remains approved as an ADR provider. The Ombudsman Association found a number of problems. They found that the provider was misleading with its information on its website. It provided misleading information regarding members and using non-member logos in its annual report. There was an incorrect listing of members and of financial services which fell into jurisdiction of the Financial Ombudsman. There were concerns about governance and control, and with their not meeting openness and transparency standards. Rot starts from the top. Stop spending money on approving yet more bodies to provide ADR services, which are merely causing an increase in confusion for consumers. Start monitoring what we have got appropriately and, shock horror, revoke approval from providers who are not providing high-quality ADR services. What happens if and when a provider produces questionable reports because they haven't been properly scrutinised? Or if it breaks copyright or other laws or provides other services to its own members? A clear conflict of interest. All of these things have and are happening, by the way. So what happens if and when a provider goes under? One provider with history for running companies that have been dissolved and liquidated, owing money to HMRC and others no less, could go under. What will happen to consumer data if it does? What will happen to the cases? And so on and so forth. The media is increasingly taking notice of ADR and the oversight and approval and particular providers. Ultimately, what will happen to trust in the whole of the sector? Perhaps it really is time the powers that be started to listen. High-quality providers will provide high-quality services, which in turn will raise awareness of schemes, consistency of provision and acceptable outcomes for consumers. Stop wasting time and resources reinventing the wheel. Listen, analyse and take the right remedial and proactive action. That is how you fix the ADR problems.